All right, everybody. It says I'm live, and as usual, I ask for your help in letting me know whether or not you can hear or see me. Preferably both, but you only need really one of those two to work. And welcome to another Monday night where we're going to discuss some events that are happening right now in the country related to preparedness to give you some ideas about what you should be ready for in the future and the things you should be preparing for in the sense of domestic issues, because that's kind of tonight's main topic. And as I spoke about last week, I'm trying my best to form these live streams around a singular topic more so than trying to touch on every little item that's happened recently, just because of the amount of information I can actually put out is exceeding when it comes to that particular topic versus trying to touch base on every individual aspect of what's happening globally. You only get a little bits and pieces of each of those items, and it doesn't really explain a full story. So that's kind of my thought process there. So hopefully that makes a lot of sense. Good to see everybody. I'm seeing 5x5s file on in, so I'm trying to switch some things around here. We've got Bees Nuts in the house. We got Welcome to My Life 5x5, Harbor Prepper 5x5, Exile Reviews. Thank you for being here. Thank you for modding. And Isaac Haney says it's alive. So good to go. Good to see everybody. And if you're here on the replay, thanks for coming back and watching it. I know it's late at night for some people, so I don't expect everybody to be able to make it and be here all night long, but I appreciate the backtracking later on. So let's talk about what's going on tonight. Now, the thumbnail is where they go, right? And of course, the title tonight is SHTF pieces moving into place by us. Not by the US, but by us, okay? When I say that, I mean by the people in the United States, because there's a lot of pieces being moved around the chessboard right now that are going to be very integral to any type of, let's just say, domestic issue. And when I say issue, I think you understand exactly what I'm talking about. So, what's the problem? Why do we need to be paying attention to what's going on related to migrants entering the country and how they're being dispersed around the country and how that could be used against us here in the future and what kind of leverage that provides those who would like to see, I don't know, some sort of instability happen here in the United States, which we've talked about here and there and everywhere. So let's just get it started, okay? First off, tonight we're going to talk about the most relevant in the sense of timing, like the most recent news all the way to stuff that's happened last year even, in order to give you a good idea of exactly what's happening and why we need to be paying attention to this, okay? So we have the situation at the border saying that the crossings have gone down by half since the rule change, okay? Now, always read these things with a little bit more intention than what they expect the average reader to read them with, right? Because there's always semantics at play where they try to downplay certain aspects of what's being reported in order to fit the typical narrative, right? But just be aware that as of right now, it's being reported that the border crossings are down by half, but that is not exactly the case. So I'll explain that here right now. U.S. border authorities have seen a 50% drop in encounters with undocumented migrants crossing the southern border since the country's Title 42 migration policy ended, the country's Homeland Security chief said Sunday. Now, just from that first paragraph, you can understand that the title is not the same as the information being given, which is why I always want everyone to really read these things with a little bit more intent, because it's more indicative as to what's happening if you read between the lines, right? So if you were just to read the title, you'd be like, look, border crossings are down by half. This isn't a big deal, okay? But when you read into what's actually happening, it's that the encounters are down by 50%, which could mean a lot of different things, not just the fact that less people are crossing the border. But either way, we can move forward on that. Over the past 2 days, the United States Border Patrol has experienced a 50% drop in the number of encounters versus what we were experiencing earlier in the week. And there's a concept in play where a lot of people that were trying to cross the border illegally made their move before the expiration of Title 42 in order to avoid the new Title 8 clauses, which, if you're unaware, Title 8 would basically say that if you were crossing illegally and you were caught, you would be deported and then also banned from re-entering for up to 5 years and then possibly facing jail time and prison time and everything else like that. Whereas Title 42 had more of a sanctuary policy based on restrictions put onto us by the event of 2020. So, understand that this is the narrative that's being put out right this second, okay? So, what else has just been happening? Well, we had the expiration of Title 42. So now we're going to go to May 11th, right? So we went from May 14th to May 11th, and like I said, we're going to kind of backtrack tonight in order to paint a full picture as to why you should be prepared for these pieces that have been moved into place and why they could easily affect you here in the very near future. And this, I guess, let me preface the rest of this conversation in a way that makes more sense, right? This is not about illegal immigration. This is not about tax money. This is not about political posturing or anything along those lines, right? This is very strategic in nature, and it's being purposefully done by those who have intent and ill will against the United States. And I think that if we frame everything we're going to discuss tonight in that way, you'll understand why this is more important than just, well, all these people are coming in the country, we can't afford it, right? It really doesn't have as much to do with that as it does the intentions that are in place for these people to eventually enact, okay? So keep that in mind, right? We're in a different world right now. We're in next generation or fifth generation warfare, right? There's a lot of things happening underneath our nose that even the mainstream media is either implicit on or honestly doesn't know. Because at this point in time, is there any journalistic integrity, or are all those people spoon-fed the stories that they put out, right? And if they're spoon-fed the stories, then they probably don't know what's actually happening unless you get real journalists in there that actually want to investigate. But obviously those people tend to disappear, or who knows what else. Now, there are people being bussed all over the country and placed into different parts of the country, and not all of them are exactly what they seem. And so there's some things we have to consider here, but before we can do that, I wanted to frame that entire conversation to let you know why this matters more so than just, oh, let's just complain about illegal immigration because of all the usual complaints, right? The financial aspect of it, the strain on the system aspect on it, the demographic change aspect of it, right? Where a lot of people blame that on, the politics of the left, saying, oh, they're trying to build a voter base and a demographic. That's low bar thought process when it comes to what's actually happening here. That's what I'm trying to raise awareness around. Not necessarily the idea that, this isn't an issue, because it is an issue regardless. It's still an issue in all of those different, situations, but it's much more than that. And that's why we have to be prepared for things to be more dangerous than what we would have usually anticipated, right? Because if things are here at home already and can spawn from within, it's a lot more dangerous than if we're just talking about things overseas possibly coming here and having a warning system in place and everything else, right? It's just not the same. So let's kind of move forward now that you have that framing in mind, because I don't want anyone to misconstrue this live chat to be just a complaint session about illegal immigration. That's actually not the biggest concern here, right? Okay, so migrants rush across U.S. border in final hours before Title 42 asylum restrictions are lifted, okay? So this is that final push where everybody's coming in. And the big takeaway here is just the amount of people that are coming through, okay? The Border Patrol stopped about 10,000 migrants on Tuesday, one of its busiest days ever, okay? So we have like the most people coming through ever within the last week. All right. According to a second U.S. official who provided information to the AP on condition of anonymity because the official was not authorized to speak publicly about the matter. Now, this gives us a lot of information in one paragraph. First off, you have 10,000 people being stopped in one day, which means how many were not, right? This is a percentages game. You have to understand that only a certain percent of people are stopped and the rest come through. 10,000 were stopped, and that's amidst the Border Patrol strengthening their forces and putting more people out there in order to deal with this influx. And we also have the idea that an official had to talk about it under condition of anonymity because they weren't authorized to speak on it, which is, in layman's terms, a way of saying I'm not allowed to speak about it because they don't want you to know this information, right? Now, of course, this is coming through the mainstream media, so who knows if this is skewed or put out there in a way that's trying to create an emotional response for us, right? But at the end of the day, it's still an enormous amount of people coming through. And we do have, luckily in this community, boots on the ground down on the border, members of the Border Patrol who are worried about the fate of America. And they're also prepared and concerned citizens, just like we are, who have given us information to say, hey, these numbers are accurate in the sense of how many people are really coming through. It's an outrageous amount of people, okay? So just so you're aware, that paragraph in itself tells quite a story on its own. 10,000 migrants stopped on Tuesday, right? That's nearly double the daily average of about 5,200 in March, the latest publicly available data, and close to the 11,000 that the U.S. officials have predicted is the upper limit of the surge they anticipate after Title 42. Now, keep in mind, the previous article mentioned that everything's down by half, but that's encounters. And just like in this story, the Border Patrol stopped 10,000 migrants, that's 10,000 encounters, and if these encounters aren't occurring because you either have less manpower or people are being told to stand down or who knows what else, then they can count the amount of people as being less because it's just based on encounters in general, not the actual amount of people. More than 27,000 people were in U.S. Customs and Border Protection custody, the official said. Okay, I mean, that's a huge strain on our system. 27,000 people in custody is a crazy amount of human beings to try to keep in line, right? I mean, that's a huge amount of resources and manpower that's being spent on just that, running facilities that have over 27,000 people in them, not to mention the strain on the systems required to keep those facilities up and running when it even comes to the basic bare minimum resources such as water, electricity, and everything else, right? So if you were a foreign entity who wanted to run a destabilization campaign here in the United States, this would probably be one of the best ways to do it, right? It's very similar to what you see in cyber attacks. When you want to correlate it to something more technological, this is like a almost like a failure of service attack or a DNS attack, right? Where you just overload a server by having thousands of people try to log into a website all at the same time, and it crashes the website because they don't have the bandwidth to support that many people trying to log in, right? Well, that's just what this can do in real life in the sense of human beings versus IP addresses, right? So this is a very strategic way to put a strain on a system that you're trying to break, okay? Now, and real quick, Major Sean Stewart of the Texas National Guard said his troops have explained to migrants the consequences of crossing illegally. I'm sure they're very aware, but thanks for explaining it. The migrants don't really know what's going to happen, Stewart said. They don't care. It's not that they don't know. It's that they're just trying to get in, right? Especially the ones that might have a goal in mind. And when we talk about a goal in mind, the goals could be anywhere from, bettering themselves financially and economically, which is the majority of illegal immigrants, right? That's just the truth. Most of the people who are trying to come across are doing it to better their lives. It's just, it makes sense because where they live sucks. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's just true. It's dangerous. It's sad, and they're worried about their children. But there's a large portion, a large percentage that also have other reasons for why they're trying to get in. Such as this Afghan on terrorist watch list arrested at the U.S.-Mexico border crossing in San Diego. Okay? Now, just so you guys know, and I'm just going to put this out there because this is relatively important, all right? I'm trying to make sure that the audio is good here. Things are weird every so often, and I have to go back and verify that we are moving forward smoothly. Gardner Josh, good to see you. It's been a while, or maybe it hasn't. I just haven't caught your name in the chat, but thanks for being here and modding. So here's the thing I want to mention. On this platform, when you say certain words, the algorithm says, hold up, and then it goes through and tries to make sure that, you're within compliance and stuff. And terrorist is one of those words. And when I read these articles, I'm reading them because that's what the news is putting out there, right? So I'm not spreading misinformation or doing anything outside of the realm of just sharing legitimate news, right? At least in some people's opinion, okay? But what I want you to know is that by saying these words and reading these stories, very often these conversations are limited in their bandwidth. And when I say that, what I mean is the amount of people that actually are made aware of this conversation we're having right now. So any sharing or liking of this video that you guys can do is going to help, because by me saying strictly just the word terrorist, this video is already in a different category of what's going to actually be put out to the masses. And that's just the truth, and that's just how it works here on this platform. It's not the way I would have it or the way I would like it, but that's not up to me now, is it? So anything you guys can do to help to get the word out, please do, because I don't generally ask for like the thumbs up or the sharing of these videos, but if I'm going to say things the way they are, then we're going to need the extra support, basically. All right, so Afghan on terrorist watch list arrested at U.S.-Mexico border crossing in San Diego. So this is not just Texas, it's not just Arizona, it's also California, right? So every border state is facing a lot of these issues and has people coming in that aren't supposed to be coming in through the southern border. According to Supervisor Jim Desmond's office, an Afghani on the terror watch list was arrested in Otay Mesa amid a migrant surge after the end of Title 42. A person on the U.S. terror watch list was arrested near a U.S.-Mexico border crossing in San Diego as thousands of migrants flocked to the United States seeking asylum ahead of the expiration of Title 42. In a statement released to local media, Supervisor Desmond confirmed he had heard about the arrest on Wednesday, May 10th. Now, understand that this statement was released to local media. This is not on every major news site. This is not in your general mainstream media feed. This is from CBS 8, a local news station, and it has been shared by other larger media organizations like the New York Post, but this is not front page news on Fox, right? This is not front page news on CNN, right? This is like the information you have to seek out. You don't necessarily just get this given to you by those major corporations, okay? So, on Wednesday, I received word from Border Patrol officials that an Afghani on the terror watch list was arrested at our southern border. This apprehension occurred after the individual crossed the border alongside a group of migrants near Otay Mesa, California. Rumors of the arrest initially began circulating on social media when Fox News reporter Bill Malugan tweeted that numerous U.S. Customs and Border Protection sources confirmed that agents in San Diego sector arrested the Afghan national. And like I said, so this is a Fox News reporter from Los Angeles. This is not on the main page of Fox News, okay? This is why I'm trying to explain this to you, because if you only go to those sources to get your news, you're missing quite a bit of it. Now, here's the thing, and this is kind of important here. This is not necessarily the number one issue that we're watching out for when it comes to these border crossings and the unknown factor of those who are crossing the border, okay? Yes, this Afghani who's on a terror watch list is problematic and somebody we could take a look at. However, there are certain groups who are much more problematic that are crossing the border at a much more regular rate that aren't being interpreted as being part of this terror watch list, which means they don't make the news, which also means that they have a much better chance of getting through in large numbers without raising any red flags, at least when it comes to the media coverage, right? So this person, yes, they were caught, and who knows what else happens from there, okay? But this should tell you a couple things. One, people that are part of these organizations are getting through the southern border. They know it's open, they know they can make it, and they're going to try and do that, okay? Number two is that this person fits a narrative that already pre-exists the things that we need to be concerned about. And when I say that, what I mean is that this person comes from a place that's already, let's just say, attached to the idea of terroristic activities in a lot of people's brains, especially here in the United States, right? People can think of certain countries in the Middle East, right? Especially those who are part of the general population who don't really pay attention to a lot of these things. They know about Afghanistan, they know about Iraq, they know about Iran, right? So a guy from Afghanistan who's on a terror watch list makes a lot of sense. And so they put that on the news and let you know that they are, in fact, catching people who are bad at the border and trying to take care of that. So you either calm people down who are concerned, a little bit about it, and you let the people know who are really concerned that things are happening and this is what you wanted and we're doing the best we can, right? But the real concern isn't about, look, there is a concern. I'm not trying to downplay the fact that this person might have had ill intentions and might have done something terrible here in the United States if they weren't caught. But what I'm trying to say is that the groups and the people that we need to be watching for are from China and related to other countries that would benefit from our instability. And when I say that, I mean Venezuela. Okay, lots of Venezuelans are coming through the southern border as well. And that shouldn't raise a lot of concerns because, right, they have a terrible system right now economically in their country. They've gone through a horrible, financial decline, and, their quality of life has gone down the tubes. But we also have to keep in mind that they are a country that has very strong relations to Russia, and that there's a good chance that these countries, because we know Russia and China are working together, this is not, nobody's like playing ball fair, right? This isn't some kind of major league sports event where China, Russia, and the United States all get together and play in the World Cup, right? Like, this is not how this works. These countries are actual adversaries out there that could do something militarily towards us, or have a better chance at it, at least in a country like Afghanistan, right? They have a much more vested interest in this campaign of instability, right? Destabilization, you might call it. So, excuse me. Now, you're not going to hear that on the news. You're not going to hear that they caught a Chinese national, because guess what? Most likely he's not on a terror watch list. You're not going to hear that they caught a Venezuelan national, because guess what? Most likely not on a terror watch list. So this almost feels more like food for the sharks, right? Like, this is like there for you to know, to make you go away, right? Everything has a little bit of truth to it. And they know that if there's complete inaction, that it will only cause them more problems and buy them less time for moving forward in some of the plans that are being put into place. So they give you these little crumbs to say, no, look, we're doing this thing and this is good, right? And it buys time, because basically you're saying, well, they are doing this and they're catching these guys, but these aren't the droids you're looking for. All right. Sorry, I literally had to. You can't hate me for that. Now, Pepe D's Nuts says Glowy is a Fed boy. I mean, I don't know if we're talking about me or not, but I have been accused quite regularly of being a Fed. So, and I'll say I'm not, but that won't matter to the people who think I am. So I guess it just doesn't matter, does it? Either way, B's Nuts. Thank you for doing what you do. We need brave people to spread the truth. Pray for Tom McDonald's. His new video, Dirty Money, might put him on the radar. Well, you know what? That guy is very ballsy in the type of music and videos that he puts out, and I'll definitely give him credit on that. Definitely a very talented guy, and I am a musician as well, so I can always appreciate people who are able to put together things creatively like that and actually make it good in the process, rather than just being a billboard for some sort of ideological complaint, right? Like instead creating a piece of art that still puts out the message in a way that's entertaining, right? Because that matters in music still. So yeah, I appreciate you letting me know about that. Now, let's go ahead and talk about how this is going. Because so I just gave you the information surrounding the idea that we had 10,000 migrants, in a day being encountered by the Border Patrol, right? We have a huge influx of people coming through. We now have the amount of encounters down by 50%, but that doesn't mean that less people are coming through, as we discussed, right? So we know the news likes to spin things in a way that paints a positive picture for those who are their handlers, basically, right? Like we all know about Operation Mockingbird, I assume, and if you don't, you should definitely look it up because it's very real. And at the same time, we know that, yes, there are people who are on the terror watch list literally coming in through the southern border. Now, whether or not those are the main people we should be concerned about, it does tell us that, yes, people who are possibly wishing to do ill will here are aware of the idea that they can come up through the south. And the other people who aren't on the list that also have the same intentions know that too. Okay? Now, let's go ahead and jump over here. Where'd everyone go? Okay, so we have 10,000 encounters, all these people coming through, millions of people have been coming through the border for years at this point, right? Where do they go? Well, here's what I want everyone to really kind of think about. This might be intentional, but it also might be unintentional political posturing that created a very bad situation unintentionally because of wanting to score points with a base, right? Cherokee Survival. You're Fed, okay, I be one also. Yeah, we can be one together. We'll be, Fed buddies. And, maybe that's like some kind of a group or a crew we need to start, in order to kind of take the word Fed back, and it's ours now. You don't get to be that anymore. It's us, right? So, because I'm pretty sure that's how this works, right? Like we the people. Doesn't that make us the Feds in a way? I don't know. Anyway, sorry, I had to go on a little tangent there, I guess. But here's the thing. Politicians are going to score political points, regardless of the consequences, right? And I think we've seen a lot of that. And I'm not going to keep saying right. I'm trying so hard. Thank you. However, these chess pieces, not chess, right? It's a real game. I know about it, I promise. But these chess pieces are being moved all over the country, everywhere. And when I say chess pieces, I mean strategically placed in places that matter for destabilization. Now, there's a couple ways to look at this. You have people that are being placed in different parts of the country for actual kinetic activities, and what I mean by that is sleeper cells that are able to be activated at some point in time, which would then allow for some kind of conventional activity to occur, right? Or who knows, maybe biologic or nuclear. For all we know, we have no idea. But we also have the destabilization of the strain of the system, right? So you keep placing more and more people that are dependent on the system in these areas in a concentrated way, which then destabilizes that area and that system to the point where it needs to be either rescued or abandoned, okay? So keep all these things in mind as we move forward. But I'm trying to like open up your perception to this concept more so than just giving you like the base level information, because we can just read numbers and news reports all day long, but by framing it contextually in a way that gives you an idea as to why this matters, I feel like it's more important to your ability to strategize, okay? Let's see. Silent says, oh, I'm a clone. I'm the clone baby. It's it's just something that happened to me one time. I can't help it. And then Pepe D's Nuts thinks I'm a lizard person, which I've been accused of that as well because I do have weird eyes, and we can talk about that another time. But anyway, let's go ahead and talk about where all these people went and where they're going. And if you're in these areas, you need to pay very close attention to what's happening in your area. Let's go over this one more time real quick. This is not about the base arguments that we hear, okay? This is not about taxes. This is not about demographics of voters, right? This is not about trying to, change everyone's ideology. This is not as political as it looks on the outside. This is strategic fifth generation warfare at its finest, which is why it's so easily defined as something other than that, because that's how you do it. You conceal it in a way that makes people, even if it makes people mad, they still, in their mind, now I'm mad about it. Because here, I'll give you the most basic example. We don't need to get too political here because it's not part of the conversation. But here's a basic example of what you're going to hear about this, right? Oh, the Democrats are doing this to get more voters so that they can never lose again, right? And so what that does is it makes people angry, and it makes people say, yeah, that's ridiculous, and I know that's why they're doing it. And they use your emotions against you to go ahead and confirm what it is you already believed. And then because it makes you so upset, how could it be untrue, right? And so you latch onto that concept because, oh man, like they would do that, right? And then you just keep moving forward with that idea in mind. And luckily for them, you're no longer considering the fact that this is a strategic placement of people in order to destabilize the United States of America in a fifth generation warfare campaign. I don't know how else to say it, okay? But you can understand why it's so easily bypassed because of how the rhetoric sounds surrounding the entire situation, okay? And all I'm trying to say is, look, you can have your beliefs in the sense of the political aspects of what's happening, but I want you to try to step out of that if you can to really fully grasp what this is more so than what it looks like, okay? And I guess that's the best way for me to say it. Migrant bus arrives at Kamala Harris's doorstep hours before end of Title 42, okay? A busload of migrants from Texas arrived at Vice President Kamala Harris's residence in Washington, D.C. on Thursday, hours before Title 42 was set to expire. More than 30 migrants, men, women, and children, most from Venezuela, right? You would assume that most of these from Mexico, because that's where all these people are coming in from. But these people were mostly from Venezuela, interestingly enough. Venezuela, very close ties with Russia. Venezuela, communist country, right? So, let's keep that in mind. They were dropped off outside the U.S. Naval Observatory, which hosts the official residence of the vice president, according to NBC News. The outlet reports that the bus was the second to arrive at the Naval Observatory in less than 24 hours, with the first vehicle dropping off almost 40 individuals. Texas has been busing migrants to Harris's house and other liberal enclaves since last year in an effort to demonstrate the challenge that border states face due to immigration crisis and dispute the Biden administration's claim that the border is secure. Okay? Now look, I understand this strategy of, oh, this is what you want, right? So here you go, you can have it. But I also want you to consider this, okay? Because, like I said, political posturing to score political points is generally the name of the game. And for the base who would support someone like Governor Abbott, they're going to be happy about this move. Like, yeah, give them a taste of their own medicine, okay? But understand, let's break this down in a very simplistic form. And I'm going to say this in a different way that still says the exact same thing to try to help you understand why this is such an issue and why we should be concerned about it, okay? All right, here we go. Magic Prepper's version of the story that applies to what we're talking about tonight, okay? More than 30 migrants, men, women, and children from Venezuela were dropped off in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. Less than 24 hours before that, another bus dropped off almost 40 individuals at the nation's capital, equaling 70 migrants, mostly from Venezuela, being bused directly to Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Which, if you were to be in a kinetic warfare engagement with the United States, infiltrating 70 of your warfighters into the nation's capital would be very valuable, would it not? Okay? Now, that was with some dramaticism, right? I was trying to add some drama into that context. But you understand that that's exactly how you could report this exact same thing and it not be untrue. Right? However, that's not the information or the narrative that's being spread. Okay? So, Richard Rattano says right, which means I get to say it. So, thank you, Richard Rattano, for that. Let's see. We've got Viv B is worried about meth gators with lasers. And unfortunately, they usually stay in Florida, which means Florida is pretty well defended from anyone who wants to steal any meth. But that's rarely the situation that we're dealing with. So, and I'm from Florida, so I can say that, okay? Porky Prepper says 70 well-trained sleepers, right? So look, we don't know that for a fact, but what I'm trying to say is that even if 5 of those people had ill intent and were previously intercepted and then put out there in the sense of being on mission rather than just being a refugee, that's 5 people who made it into the nation's capital that don't have any business being near it, right? Now, Texas is doing it, and I don't blame Texas for this, and I'm trying to make sure you guys understand it. Like, at base level, if there's no intention to help propagate this whole plan by the governor of Texas, if he's doing this literally because it's a protest for what's happening to his state, I understand that. However, the consequences and the implications of these actions might be very bad and drastic, right? And unfortunately, and I'm just going to say this, look, border states are better equipped to deal with these people than states that are within the interior because they don't have to do it as often and they aren't as accustomed to it, right? So not only do these people get to these places like Washington, D.C. and then disappear because they're not used to having to hunt down illegal immigrants, basically, right? They disappear and then who knows where they go next. And there is no retrieving these people. Like once they're there, that's it. That's it. They don't have the infrastructure that a state like Texas has to do the whole catch and release program, which whether or not that's effective is a different conversation. However, Washington, D.C. does not have that same infrastructure in place. And once these people are moved to the interior of the country, they don't leave. They don't go anywhere, right? And you think about other states, right, which we'll talk about here as well. They're not equipped for this. So although this wins political points, and although this is a winning strategy in the sense of getting votes, is this good for the country, right? Because look, as much as Washington, D.C. is a swamp, right, there are good people who live there that don't deserve to be having this happen in their backyard, right? Just like this story right here. Buses of migrants from New York City arrive in Orange County. Rockland gets restraining order. This is May 11th, okay? Buses of migrants from New York City arrived in Orange County, which is in New York, on Thursday, despite officials enacting a state of emergency. It comes as Orange County had issued an executive order prohibiting hotels to be used as long-term residences. And later Thursday, Rockland County was granted a temporary restraining order against New York City and Mayor Eric Adams, prohibiting the city proceeding with its plan to turn the Armani Inn and Suites in Orangeburg into a shelter for 340 migrants. Officials said due to New York City's lack of honest and clear disregard for local and state laws and the state of emergency in Orange County, the Rockland County Sheriff's Office will remain posted outside of the hotel as a precaution. The city of New York lacks authority to establish a shelter outside of its boundaries, in addition of failing to follow New York state rules and regulations required to do so, explained Rockland County Attorney Thomas Humbach. At this point, the temporary restraining order prohibits the city from bringing people to Rockland County for the purpose of sheltering them. Now, this is just a microcosm of the conversation, right? But here we have a city in New York that's not New York City that's having migrants from New York City being bused to them. So here's the thing. Buses are being sent to New York City just like they are Washington, D.C. And then New York City is saying, well, what do we do with these people? And now they're busing them to another part of New York. Upstate New York is not New York City. There are people in upstate New York who are very much different than those you'll find in New York City, and upstate New York isn't equipped to deal with illegal immigration from the southern border, right? But here we are. Now understand that these people are being moved all over the country. And for everyone who thinks that they're immune to this because of where they live, maybe in a smaller town or something, well, Orange County is not New York City, right? So I'm sure the people in Rockland or Rockland County had no idea that they were suddenly going to be dealing with this and aren't equipped for it at all. And here they are, right? So this is another example of people being moved around, these chess pieces being strategically placed, not just in major cities or major hubs when it comes to our political system or our economic system, but also into smaller areas, right? Where there is even less of an infrastructure in place to process these people or to track them or to keep tabs on where they end up or what they do. Now, I don't have to tell you all this, but throughout the Cold War, as well as in the early 2000s and up until this day, right now, of course, there was plenty of Russian sleeper cells all over the country where they had people immigrate to the country. They had them set up their lives just as if they were Americans. They bought homes, had mortgages, they bought cars, they had their kids in school, they went to church, they got involved with the community. You wouldn't have known they were Russian, basically, unless you caught them red-handed doing something very Russian, right? And that was very successful for Russia for quite some time. These people are even easier in the sense of hiding because we are already assimilated as a country to expect people to be from other places, to not speak English, to not be part of that general American lifestyle, right? Which is just what we've transformed into over the years. So because of that, we're not looking for people who are outside of the norm because that's a huge percentage of the population at this point anyway, right? So it's much easier to get these people in and then have them disappear because, I mean, no one's going to be able to point it out, right? You're just going to see people and they're just going to be people. And that's another part of the strategy, okay? Now, let's see here. We've got people in the chat. I'm just trying to say hello. Connor B. Griffin, I'm trying not to say it so much. I'm really trying, okay? But I appreciate you keeping account. It will help me mitigate the amount of that word that I use. All right. So, I said all right. That's different. Don't count that one. Now, guess where else they're going, okay? To Canada, even. So it's not just us, even. Surprise, in Canada, as New York City buses migrants to border. This is from the 7th of February, okay? So this is much earlier than this whole Title 42 expiration. And like I told you, we're going to go through and actually go back in time a little bit tonight to show you just how many of these people have been dispersed throughout the country and in what parts of the country, and why you should be aware of the fact that this destabilization campaign already has roots. It's not something that's new. It's something that maybe we're late to the game on in the sense of being more aware of it. But luckily, I've been made aware of a lot of these moves and a lot of these activities, which means I'm able to share them with you here in the community to give you more reasons to be prepared for these things to unfold at some point in time, okay? Surprise in Canada is New York City buses migrants to border, okay? So New York City's just going ham. They're just sending people wherever they want. An immigration official in the Canadian province of Quebec has said that it's surprising to learn that New York City is sending migrants to the country's border. New York City Mayor Eric Adams told Fox 5 that his administration was assisting migrants who had been sent to his city but wanted to go elsewhere. Some want to go to Canada. Some want to go to warmer states. And we are there for them as they continue to move on with their pursuit of this dream. Okay? So, they're going to Canada, right? You got me, man. I did it again. But they're going to Canada or even warmer states. So New York City is doing their best to facilitate this disbursement of people throughout the country and helping to strategically locate these people in different places. Okay? Now, it's countrywide. And this is the meat and potatoes of what we're getting into tonight. We have to be very aware of how detrimental this is. We're already under a destabilization campaign in the sense of a fifth-generation warfare front. And where these people are being sent to and where they're being sent from are some of the hotbeds of this activity, which is why you need to be aware of it. Colorado is busing migrants to New York and other major cities. So, now this is not Texas, this is Colorado, which tells you two things. One, that Colorado also has problems when it comes to having these large groups of people that are unvetted and within the borders of their state, and two, that they are also willing to start moving them all over the country, even though Colorado has a Democratic governor. So this is not just purely along political lines. This is happening in other states that you wouldn't assume would be part of this activity, which makes you question a few things. One, is there any intentionality here? It's hard not to question that, especially, and I'm sorry to say it, but especially based on certain political parties, because there are some political parties who seem to align more with some of our adversaries than with some of us here at home. And that's just the honest truth at this point. I mean, at the bare minimum, if you can just interpret the Constitution for what it should mean, then it's pretty easy to draw some of those lines. However, I think most of our politicians are often crossing the line of unconstitutionality, right? It's just going to happen. I'm just not even going to try to stop it anymore. Colorado Governor Jared Polis is busing migrants who recently arrived in Denver from the southern U.S. border to other major cities. This is from January 3rd. So this is this year, but like I said, we're going back in time a little bit to give you some grandiose understanding as to how far this is going, okay? The Democratic governor's move echoes actions by Republican governors in Texas and Florida that were labeled callous and cruel. In a statement Tuesday, Paulus said his administration is helping migrants reach their intended destinations because 70% don't plan to stay in Colorado. I wonder why. Why would they not want to stay in Colorado? What's wrong with Colorado? Right? Well, you're already out of whatever country you left. Colorado's got to be a step up. Colorado's not good enough for you? Or is there somewhere else you need to be in order to be where you're supposed to be? Colorado earmarked $5 million to assist people identified as migrants, including helping them purchase bus tickets. About half the money is allocated already. By the way, these are people who are identified as migrants, which means I'm pretty sure you could get some of that $5 million if you just decide to identify as a migrant, all right? Had to. They put it there for me. New York Mayor Eric Adams revealed Paulus' plan in a radio interview earlier Tuesday. We were notified that the governor of Colorado is now stating that they are going to be sending migrants to places like New York and Chicago. This is just unfair for local governments to have to take on this national obligation. Well, it is what it is, I guess. More than 3,500 people have arrived in Denver from the southern border since December 9th, so within a month. Okay, their immigration status is unknown, but officials have suggested some are asylum seekers from Central and South America. It's not really known, but some of them are probably this. That's where we're at. So now we have other states that are having to bus people out, that are receiving people from the southern border, that are sending people to other parts of the country. You see how quickly and how efficiently people are being spread across the country to multiple different areas, especially major economic hubs. Regardless of your feelings of our major urban areas, because I know a lot of people are very negative about them because of their decline in many ways. Regardless of your feelings of that, they are still enormous economic hubs of this country. And those places have the largest effect when they're destabilized on the rest of the country. If you destabilize small town North Dakota, no one will even really notice, right? I mean, that's unfortunately true. But if you destabilize New York City, it will have an effect on the rest of the country in many ways. So understand that those are still your main target areas. But you have to be very, I guess, concerned with the idea that Washington, D.C. is part of that equation, because that is our capital. Whether or not it is corrupt and whether or not it has a lot of problems doesn't change the fact that it's the nation's capital. Florida Sheepdog 1. Migrants arrive at Kama's house. So evidently, she's bringing work home, right? And see, that's the thing. I don't want you to pry into that too politically. I want you to take the equation and change it around, rather than it being where Kamala Harris lives and whether or not she actually lives there, right? I want you to think of it as unvetted migrants are being sent to Washington, D.C., right? That's what it really is. Who cares about where she lives or even just her as herself, right? She's a vice president, great, okay? She can go anywhere she wants. She has security and bunkers and everything else. We don't. And most of the people in Washington, D.C. don't. And that's something to keep in mind, that there's plenty of us, brothers and sisters that live in places they don't necessarily want to be, but they're there by default or circumstance or who knows what else. And they're also going to have to be dealing with a lot of this if things ever get turned up a notch. Okay, Pagan Prepper says, please talk to people about their constitutional rights. It's what binds us. I'll spend money on this because it's so important to all of us. Oh, well, thank you. And I don't require super chats to read someone's comment, but I do feel inclined to read them if I get them, because, I mean, I feel inclined. I mean, what else am I supposed to say, right? But I do agree with that. The constitutional rights are huge, and we're losing them every single day. Even at base minimum, like the Fourth Amendment. A lot of people don't realize how quickly that's going away as well, especially with the ATF pulling up your credit card records and finding out what things you've purchased and then showing up to your house to say, hey, we saw you purchase one of these, and just so you know, they're illegal now, and you got to give it to us. I'm pretty sure there's some Fourth Amendment rights being violated there, considering there's no warrants being put out. But hey, what do I know? I'm not a lawyer, so here we are. But let's jump back into some of the things that are happening, all right? This is countrywide, and this is what I'm trying to drive home. Federal officials leave dozens of migrants at bus stations across San Diego County. December 24th, 2022. So now we're about 6 months ago. But this has been happening since before the Title 42 thing, and it's going to continue to happen. Due to flight delays from winter storms, migrant shelters haven't been able to move guests through as quickly as normal and now at capacity, meaning many new arrivals have been left on the streets, okay? So here you have federal officials leaving migrants at bus stations and just calling it a day. So these people aren't even being taken to any proper facilities, and they're going to blame it on winter storms in San Diego, California. I know it. I know winter conditions happen everywhere, but we're talking about San Diego here, all right? Due to the extreme weather conditions impacting outbound travel, our resources and the current infrastructure have been stretched to capacity, said the San Diego Rapid Response Network Migrant Shelter in an emailed statement. At this time, we cannot respond to requests coming through our SDRRN emergency hotline to assist in sheltering additional asylum seekers, which means everybody who couldn't get processed probably got let out on the street to do whatever. And this is in California. And the main reason of sharing this story is that to let you know that federal officials, not state officials and not local police, federal officials literally left people at bus stations and said, go for it, based on emergency weather. Now, I know there was some bad weather during the winter down there, but here's the thing. I have a feeling, and this is just my opinion, that this weather was more related to where they were going rather than where they were at. Okay. Now, we have even more examples. And this is what I was trying to tell Florida Sheepdog 1, right? And it's nothing against Florida Sheepdog 1. Not trying to call you out or anything like that. But when you change the perspective from, oh yeah, that's what you get, to, well, this is probably not good for the country, you'll be more understanding as to why this is a real threat. It feels great at first, like you got to win. And then you realize, well, now what happened to those people? Or where'd they go? And what are they doing now? Why were they here in the first place? And what would be the best reason for somebody who had ill intentions against the United States of America for putting them into places like Washington, D.C.? What good would that do? Besides just, make them have to deal with it. These are things to consider. All right. So, I do want to mention a couple things. We are, 47 minutes in. This is quite a good chat we're having then, I guess. So, let's mention a couple things. One of those things is that if you are looking to strategically relocate, Survival Retreat Consulting has supported this channel, and I've worked with them in the past, and it is something that they offer in the sense of consultation services for those who are looking for ways to get out of the cities that are getting these people relocated to them, right? So this is just where you can find a free guide. If you sign up for their newsletter, you'll get a 95-page guide as to how you can strategically relocate yourself and your family to something that's more defendable as well as productive in the sense of growing a garden or who knows what else. And at the same time, you're talking about people who actually participate in prepping and do firearms training and do gardening and produce solar and everything else, right? So survivalretreatconsulting.com, definitely a good place to go if you're looking for information on how to get out of the places that you're currently in, because it's honestly very difficult at this point in time. I just put it in the chat in case you're interested. It's also in the description below. So make sure you check them out. Tell them Magic Prepper sent you if you do decide to reach out. But even if you just go there to get the free guide, probably worth the information there. Okay. And then I also want to mention that the channel's biggest supporter is Midway USA. Huge supporter of the channel. Let me do a lot of things that I wouldn't be able to do otherwise. I have access to gear and equipment that I couldn't review without their help. So a big thanks to them. And look, the second I start mentioning people who support the channel, like 30 people leave. And I understand that. But I just want everyone to also be aware of the fact that I've been very transparent about the fact that I'm going to do what I can to try to combat inflation throughout the year by trying to leverage more partnerships that are relevant to preparedness. And if you guys want me to do Raid Shadow Legends live streams for, thousands of dollars, I could do that instead. So you let me know what you'd prefer. But the things that the companies I'm working with are relevant to preparedness. So I'm doing the best I can to try to make that work, okay? Now, and yeah, Yardbirds, exactly, either way. And if you guys want me to say, anything critical about the community at times, it's that there seems to be a very anti-capitalist sentiment once in a while from a very pro-conservative demographic. So it's very concerning to me because the idea of someone earning some extra money by providing a free service should be reasonable, and instead it's scoffed upon because, how could you have any tried and true validity by accepting any type of compensation, right? And then but then that same person will go over and watch every single episode of Tucker Carlson because he's legit, even though he makes millions of dollars from advertisers every single day. Whatever, what do I know? I'm just some guy behind a computer. Now, Kevin Ramsey, thank you, I appreciate it. Now, we also have other states being affected by this besides New York City, besides Washington, D.C., besides everybody, right? We have a second migrant bus from Texas arrives in Philadelphia. So now we're in Pennsylvania, right? I said right again. It's just going to happen. I can't help it. Immigrant advocates wonder if buses with migrants from the Texas border will keep coming this week during the Thanksgiving holiday. This is from November 21st, 2022. So now we have buses dropping people off in Philadelphia, which is now more than 6 months ago. These chess pieces are being put into place not just strategically, but over time. These things don't happen overnight. If we went on a flight tracker right now and we saw 12 helicopters above the 12 largest U.S. cities, and all of them were dropping people off right from south of the border, we would all freak out and be like, it's an invasion, Red Dawn, here we go, right? So instead of that happening, you have buses and you have governors involved and states involved with this process to do it slowly and at a pace that allows everyone to see what's happening, to understand what's happening, be told what's happening by the mainstream media, and to then move on because, it's old news at this point, right? So I hope that counter is up to like 60 by now. So basically, it's a great plan. It's a really good, well thought out plan for how to get people in these positions without raising any type of red flag, especially if it was done so well and so strategically that these governors who are actually sending these people all over the country legitimately have no idea that anything else is happening here besides some kind of political posturing. If they have no intention for why they're doing these things besides trying to, say screw you to their political opponents, then the plan has been working very well. Because those people should be aware of what's happening. And if they are aware and intentionally part of the plan, which is why they're busing these people everywhere, that raises huge questions and concerns, but more than likely they've been played and are just basically involved with the crime without realizing it. They're an accomplice without knowing it. And that's very possible because a lot of these people are not as smart as they look on paper. Okay? Immigration advocates said the bus with an estimated 48 Spanish-speaking passengers was sent by Governor Greg Abbott. The bus landed outside 30th Street Station in freezing temperatures, welcomed by more than 20 immigrant leaders, city officials, and volunteers, some of whom had waited hours to help provide a greeting. Man, I wonder if any of those immigrant leaders have anything to do with any of what's happening. Or maybe intercepting certain individuals and pointing them in the right direction. They immediately handed out blankets to a toddler, a puffy winter coat. Shortly after the bus arrived at 9:45 a.m., Abbott tweeted that Texas had bused over 13,500 migrants to sanctuary cities and ticked off the numbers, including 8,400 to Washington, D.C., 3,800 to New York City, 1,200 to Chicago, and as of Monday, almost 100 to Philadelphia. So those numbers right there tell you a lot. And this is all pre this whole Title 42 situation. So we have, if you want to look at it this way, and I feel like when it comes to strategy and preparedness, we hope for the best and prepare for the worst, right? So worst case scenario, let's look at these numbers through a lens of worst case scenario. Worst case scenario, Texas inadvertently bust 8,400 possible foreign agents to Washington, D.C. That's a lot of people. For context, how many people did it take to knock out those power stations in North Carolina? How many people did it take to knock out the power station near San Jose, California? How many people tried to take out the power stations in Maryland and were foiled? I think in Maryland it was 2. North Carolina, we've never caught anybody, by the way, so have fun with that story for never being resolved. But likely not very many people were involved with that because it doesn't take very much. And the San Jose power station, they don't know how many people were involved, but they do know that it was likely someone shooting at transformers with an AK-47. So I wonder if 8,400 people could do any type of infrastructural damage or not. I don't know. Could 1% of 8,400? Yeah. Could 0.1% of 8,400? Yeah. So, now we're in Philadelphia. It doesn't stop there. But here's the thing. I think a big portion of what we're talking about here is political in disguise. 300th bus of asylum-seeking migrants arrives in Chicago from the Texas border. 300 buses worth of people. Who knows how many of them are part of this destabilization campaign? Chicago sucks. That's the best thing I got for it. Don't have anything good to say about Chicago at this point in time. Somewhere I'll never go at this point. Okay? But there's still good people there. There's still Americans there that have, the right thought process, but they are stuck wherever they're at for reasons that are probably outside of our thought process because they're in Chicago. Obviously, we already don't really understand how that's possible, let alone how they couldn't leave. But those people, there's good people in Chicago that don't deserve to be exposed to what's happening now. And they are being exposed to it, and it's being done on purpose, but maybe not with the intention that's going to create these problems for us moving into the future. This is from November 12th, 2022. It's been over 10 weeks since the first bus of asylum-seeking migrants arrived in Chicago from the Texas border, and the steady stream of arrivals has yet to slow down. Since the first bus arrived in Chicago on August 31st, the city has accepted 3,684 migrants from the Texas border. The busing of migrants is part of a controversial policy from Texas Governor Greg Abbott known as Operation Lone Star, which has also sent migrants to New York City and Washington, D.C. Additionally, Ron DeSantis, the governor of Florida, has flown asylum-seeking migrants arriving in Florida, Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. So that whole thing was a political stunt. However, it did send migrants all the way to Massachusetts as well. It's everywhere. And these people, once they get to those places, don't leave. And they aren't easy to find once again either. They don't even have to do the legwork. Could you imagine being a foreign adversary and saying, all right, how are we going to establish sleeper cells within the United States? How do we get people from point A to point B without raising any alarms? Well, the best way to do it would be to have the United States do it. Because if it's their idea, why would they think it was a bad idea? Right? I felt like it was a good time to say that. Busing in flights of migrants by GOP governors mark a new twist in state intervention on immigration, September 2022. Republicans' governors' surprise drop-offs of thousands of asylum seekers and other migrants in Democratic-led cities has escalated and reframed a simmering political feud over immigration. Yada, 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 yada. Here's the numbers that you want to look at. Cumulative numbers of Texas-based migrants by destination city 2022. Washington, D.C. is the number one. And that's to send a political message to those who are in power. However, it also means the most people that could have elements of fifth-generation warfare within them are at our nation's capital. Okay. What happens to these people once they get sent to these places? Bust flown migrants can live in U.S. for now. Republican governors have been sending more migrants released at the U.S. border with Mexico to Democratic strongholds, raising questions about their legal status, how they are lured on board buses and planes, and the cost to taxpayers. Florida's Ron DeSantis flew about 50 Venezuelans, specifically Venezuelans, last week to the small upscale island of Martha's Vineyard in Massachusetts. During the weekend, Texas Greg Abbott bused more migrants to Vice President Kamala Harris's Washington home. U.S. authorities are grappling with an unusually large numbers of migrants crossing the border from Mexico amid rapidly changing demographics. The administration said Monday that people from Venezuela, Cuba, and Nicaragua accounted for more than 1 of 3 migrants stopped at the border in August. Authorities stopped migrants 2.15 million times from October through August, the first time above 2 million during the government's fiscal year. Since April, Texas has bused about 8,000 migrants to Washington, and we already went over all that. Okay. Yes, temporarily. That's the answer to how long they can stay. Tens of thousands of migrants who cross the border illegally from Mexico are released in the United States each month with notices to appear in immigration court to pursue asylum or on humanitarian parole with requirements to report regularly to immigration authorities. Migrants may seek asylum if they enter the country illegally under U.S. and international law, and U.S. authorities have broad authority to grant parole based on individual circumstances. Migrants must keep a current address with authorities who schedule appointments in a city with the nearest court or immigration office. They must apply separately for permission to work. Last year, it took an average of nearly 4 years for asylum cases to be decided in immigration court, according to the Biden administration, leaving migrants in a legal purgatory that shields them from deportation. The backlog in immigration courts has mushroomed to more than 1.9 million cases, according to Syracuse University's Transactional Records Access Clearinghouse. To avoid massive overcrowding of detention facilities, the administration began releasing many migrants on humanitarian parole. The Border Patrol paroled nearly 250,000 migrants from August through June, including 40,151 in June. The latest figures released. In the previous 7 months, it paroled only 11 migrants. Anyway, that's a lot of people who are in legal purgatory that don't necessarily have to leave. Okay? Operation Lone Star buses more than 10,000 migrants in sanctuary cities. And this is where it all started in the sense of disbursement throughout the country. Okay? Governor Greg Abbott, the Texas Department of Public Safety, and the Texas National Guard are continuing to work together to secure the border, stop the smuggling of drugs, weapons, and people into Texas, and prevent, detect, and interdict transnational criminal behavior between ports of entry. Since the launch of Operation Lone Star, the multi-agency effort has led to more than 302,600 migrant apprehensions and more than 19,700 criminal arrests, with more than 17,200 felony charges reported. In the fight against fentanyl, DPS has seized over 340.5 million lethal doses of fentanyl during this border mission. Texas has also bused over 7,900 migrants to our nation's capital since April. So, why did I bring this up? Because we've already been talking about this all night. Because we're talking about busing these people to other places in a positive light. And sending them all over the country is not helpful, and in fact, in my opinion, extremely dangerous. Because we don't know what we don't know. And there's a destabilization campaign put together between China and the Mexican drug cartels going on right now that is easily amplified by abusing our immigration standards. And once the plan was put into place, whether or not through intention or unintentional reasons, once this Operation Lone Star was put into place, what a piece of leverage for those who would wish to do us harm to get their people into position in places that they wouldn't otherwise be able to get to as easily. You want to get thousands of your people in Washington, D.C.? Well, have the Texas governor send them there. You want to get thousands of people in place in New York City? Send them. Philadelphia? Send them. Right? Waiting for that counter. Anyway, that's what I wanted to bring to your attention. We see what we're told, right? We see what the media presents us with. And it's very easy to buy into our own emotional biases. To say, yeah, get them, right? Like, yeah, that's what you get. Like, this is what you want. So we're going to send you the problem so you can deal with it firsthand and really see what's going on here. Yeah, and I mean, it makes sense, right? At least in the sense of quid pro quo. However, there's an aspect of danger here when it's not being approached from the framing of fifth generation warfare. And unfortunately, that's what we're currently in. And if you don't know that yet, you can easily figure it out once you understand the definition of fifth generation warfare. And you know what? Here, let me pull up the textbook definition of that for you, okay? Because I just want everyone to hear it in case you're completely unfamiliar with it. All right? Fifth generation warfare is warfare that is conducted primarily through non-kinetic military action, such as social engineering, misinformation, cyber attacks, along with emerging technologies such as artificial intelligence and fully autonomous systems. That's the Google it definition. That's what we're currently in. Oath Taker 276, don't make me say it. but thank you for saying it for me. So, I want everyone to be aware of the consequences of these actions that we're currently witnessing. And in many ways, I know that the majority of this community generally leans conservatively in the sense of ideological, political stance. And many of us are guilty of applauding this behavior to say, yeah, that's right, send them there. That's where they deserve it. This is what they wanted, right? Sanctuary cities and this and that and everything else. But there are consequences to those actions that might be more detrimental down the road than had we not sent them all over the country and dispersed them all over the place where they will not be able to be managed, is the best way to say it. No one's going to know where they go, what they do, or anything else after that. It's over. Like, they're in. If you wanted to insert cells of people who could be activated at any point in time, it's already done. Done deal. They're here. Now it's a matter of time to see how long that goes on for before anybody starts to do something. And some of what we witnessed in Texas recently probably had quite a bit to do with that. And that's just my opinion. Now, I feel like the live stream is really behind me tonight. Yeah, maybe I don't know what I'm talking about. Either way, all of you are awesome. And my computer's kind of freaking out right now. But I really appreciate everybody here. I really do. It's always very motivating and very empowering to be here every Monday and have so many people support the live stream and support the preparedness community and try to really get more information. And if I want to just hop on the gravy train, we could just discuss Russia and Ukraine ad nauseum every single week. There's enough going on over there that I could put together a live stream presentation every week just based on that one event. But a lot of that's already covered. A lot of other creators are out there putting that information out there, right? A lot of the preparedness community covers it on a daily basis in many ways. So I'm trying to bring your attention to other aspects of what we're dealing with here in the world, not just the one elephant in the room. And there are things that are going on underneath our noses and under the radar on a regular basis that if they aren't brought to the light, then nobody might be aware that they exist. And so I'm doing my best to do that, to try to diversify the information that's being put out within our community in order to give you more of a reason to not just be here and be part of this conversation, but more of a reason to prepare for things other than catastrophic nuclear war, right? There's a lot of other things happening in the world that could lead us into more of a conventional kinetic situation, could lead us into more of a communal tribal scenario where we're cut off from some of the major economic hubs within the country and we have to get back to just localized, community-based interaction. And that's what I'm trying to get ready for. And hopefully you are too. So, it is at that hour point. We're going to go ahead and call it a night. Everybody else already is anyway, so I appreciate that. Magic Prepper Luke B says, I have all but left the online prepper community except for this channel and a couple others. Well, I appreciate you still being here, Luke B. Even though you and I disagree sometimes when it comes to the firearms content, because I see you in the chat and I'm cool with it. I am not, someone who is impervious to mistake. I make a lot of mistakes. I get a lot of critique and I appreciate it. But I'm glad you're still here because I'm trying my best to create a place for the people who maybe are tired of that whole war drum of information when it comes to Eastern Europe. And I'm also trying to justify why some of us feel the change that's happening in this country and why we need to be ready for that change to become very dangerous at some point. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, that's just where I'm at this point. We are in a rough spot. Laura L, thank you as well. Pagan Prepper, feds are always watching, and apparently I'm one of them. So, hey, I'm watching myself right now. Law of the minimum. Keep up the good work, man. Your intel is uniquely necessary. Subscribe Store is great, too. You cover topics no one else does. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. And, yes, if you want to jump in and have a good conversation, Subscribe Star, you can direct message me there. It's $5 a month. I have preparedness incentives. I send you a morale patch. Unless you're the one person in the Subscribe Star whose address didn't work for me, and I apologize for that. We'll try it again. But either way, we are trying to do some stuff over there, too, just so that there's kind of a backup plan for the community, as well as, I don't know, the $5 a month helps me get out on the range more and maybe put away some more food. So either way, I appreciate all the support I get. You all are amazing. All of you deserve to survive SHTF because I say so. And there it is, all right? So, without anything else to say, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.